Awesome. Yeah, thank you for your time. I spent some time reading about your background and something jumped out to me immediately that I want to ask you about because you spent, I think, 25 years in financial services and then jumped to healthcare and became the CEO of a healthcare company. So, how did that domain jump happen and how did they just elect you as the CEO of a healthcare company when you have no healthcare experience?
That's a great question. Straight in at the um, so the first thing I think is worth saying that whilst I spent quite some time in financial services, I did move around between jobs, roles, and also the sort of experiences within financial services. So everything from mortgage broking to life insurance to digital propositions and product design development to large corporate to small scale insurance companies and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I think that I sort of learned over the years is a couple of key bits which are around strategy development, and how you turn good ideas into something that becomes an executable plan. Transformation and thinking about change and how you not only deliver big programs of change, but you keep change going and you build a company or an organization or a function that's able to deliver change, think about change, keep changing in an ever-changing world. Also, with a background in technology and whilst I am not a software developer, for example, I'm dangerous enough to be able to have a conversation about how you build and architect systems and so on. And whilst the domain knowledge absolutely 100% is very important, no question, there are lots of businesses across the world who are going through a transformation program or a digital transformation program, a digital change initiative, an AI initiative, a data initiative, or which need a strategy refresh or a way of thinking differently about what they are trying to achieve, which are completely independent of the domain or the subject matter. So I can bring all of that to the party whilst I learn the other stuff. Now, of course, there's an entire lifetime of healthcare to learn, and you can learn everything from hospital administration through to clinical work or whatever. But the core of it is about building a company that's got a strategy that understands how to change and then can execute on its vision, as much as it is about some of the subject matter expertise, perhaps.
That's awesome. So it seemed a lot of your leadership capabilities transferred despite the domain knowledge had to be picked up. So what was the state of the company when you joined? So you said that you're going through like a major transformation at the time, or is that more of a general theme, or was that like something specific the company was looking for at the time you joined?
So the company had been through an acquisition, what you might call. So the bit they're looking to do is go from you've got the sort of zero to sale part of the startup journey, and then you've got sale to scale, and they were in that sort of sale to scale part. I'd say that the requirements between the two models or two modes of thinking are a little bit different. When you're trying to grow a business and build a business from scratch and to get the scale you need to show the right trajectory to potential investors or to develop the revenue line that you want from a personal perspective or whatever is different to perhaps building a business that is going to be sustained in operations that needs to scale, needs to grow revenue, etc., but also needs to take a not necessarily a longer term view. That's not looking to suggest that startup companies don't have a long term view, but you certainly need to think a little bit differently, perhaps about what the new investor itself is looking for. Where perhaps you would have cast your net wide in terms of finding business opportunities or partnerships or ways of approaching the market. Perhaps in a post sale world, you need to think a bit differently about so what the investor is looking for and how you then go and build that and scale that side of the business rather than perhaps the more startup mentality. So they're just two different modes of operation, and I think you probably know more about this than I do. But as you go from that first round of scaling to the next round and next round, etc., they all take slightly different skill sets and slightly different ways of thinking. And of course, in a post transaction world, You get different pushes and pulls on the on what people themselves are looking to achieve, and so having a refresh of leadership teams or senior people, indeed the people who have made the company grow in a certain way. People have different mindsets or different ways of thinking about what they would personally like, and there are lots of people who love the mad frenetic pace of getting something going, and there are people who love the sort of stability and just thinking about how you just improve on an incremental basis. Both are really valid and important, but both require a slightly different way of thinking.
That's awesome. Yeah. When the opportunity came your way, about a year ago now, right? Or was it this year?
18 months, something like
18
that.
months,
18
yeah.
months.
Awesome. When the opportunity came your way, did you jump on it immediately, or was there like was this a difficult decision for you to make, or would it just seem immediately obvious that this is the right path?
Uh, if very short story, if I may, very short.
Go for it.
I had long time ago after my first job, and I had a great job, great graduate program, great friends, new to the world of work, etc. And this new opportunity came up, and I was only a couple of years in, and I just thought, oh, what do you do, right? Well, how do you make this decision? How do you weigh up two quite different and unknown futures? Um, yes, this company is great. This company's growing. This company's brilliant. There's the brilliant training. They've helped me on board. But yes, this opportunity is also with a great company, and I can see why that route will be, it's more technical or it's more, whatever, a line of progress or something. But also exciting. And I remember sort of sitting in the bathroom on a Sunday evening, just like I was going to have a bath, and I was thinking about the world in general. I just thought sometimes you've just got to make the decision and go. There's never going to be enough information to uh, to tell you one way or the other whether it's what's the right decision. As long as there's no red flags or whatever, then then you can make the decision and go for it. And when an opportunity like this came along, different company, a different job title, a different level of accountability, a different industry. I love healthcare. I love the idea of helping people with with healthcare, and their helping them through their lives to live healthier, to be happier, etc., etc. And so when that opportunity comes up, you have to make the decision. You have to make the right calls. You have to think about all the options and whatever. But if there's no red flags and you want to have a broader experience of the world, then you've got to make the decision.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, some people, I think decision making is very difficult because you always want to make the perfect decision, but sometimes it's impossible to know what's going to happen. So you gotta just send it.
There's a great I don't know if you listen to the Knowledge Project
I've heard of it.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And as is typical, my brain is emptied and I can't remember the name of the presenter. Shane Parrish. There you go. He
Yeah, I
wrote a
think I've seen
brilliant
a
book.
few.
Yeah, he's great, and he had a really good set of sort of decision making tools on how to think about making decisions and what information would you get and what information could you have to help this decision make it easier. Is this decision reversible? He's synthesizing insights from other people, and I really like that as a way of thinking. If I go down this route, can I change my mind? Yeah, if I what other data would I need to make this decision better? Is that likely to happen or arrive in the next short period of time? If not, then just make the decision and get on. But I enjoy the challenge, and so it's just an easier decision to make when there's a new challenge ahead.
Yeah, awesome. What was the first month like? So you made this decision, you jumped in, and then you're here. So do you remember that first month?
Vaguely. What it was great. I got out my suit and I put on a suit and tie, and that was awesome. It was nice to get that out again. Um, it was. I think you can only do so much planning before before you take on any project or start any job or move into any new role. And of course, the things you think you know end up not being the things you need to focus on, and so on and so forth. But certainly for the first month, first period, if you're starting any new job, it's about understanding the lay of the land, and particularly if you're in a leadership role, it's about laying out the classic 30, 60, 90 days or 100-day plan, 90-day plan,
Quick question.
whichever
What
model.
was the size of the company when you joined? Like money.
It's about 100. It was about 160 people.
Awesome.
So it's small enough that you can get around and try and learn everyone's names. But it's also about meeting all the stakeholders that you're going to need to meet, and trying to understand current position, what's important, what's working, what's not working, and form that view so you can build up that sort of your view, the plan for the next 3 months at the very least, and then how that translates into a wider strategy. So quite a lot of meetings, quite a lot of listening. I will say that my very first day did involve a meeting with our clinical urologists, and that's a really quick way to start learning about the clinical and healthcare aspects of the world, and learning all about things like prostate tests and prostate cancer and pathways for diagnosing new tests coming out, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was a quick hello, welcome to the company, and straight in the deep end. We're going to start talking to you about the right way to treat urology patients. So
That's
good
awesome.
first good first month.
Yeah, I think knowledge acquisition and the speed of knowledge acquisition is something I've been really thinking about because it's something as a skill I want to develop, like the ability to pick up an area and just learn it really fast. So, given you jump right into this and we're able to pick it up very quickly, what are some lessons you've learned in knowledge acquisition and how you were able to dominate this space in terms of understanding it very quickly in like your first, maybe before you join in the first few months? How did you get the lay of the land, and what kind of tricks did you use or skills did you develop?
Wow. Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's something that I've thought about myself for years and years, because it's such a useful skill, and there are so many different ways of going about it, and that's I'm sort of quite lucky. I did a physics degree. I've got a fairly analytical mind in that sort of sense. And part of the thing, particularly around going through something like physics, is it teaches you lots of structures. I imagine sort of software development it can be quite similar. You learn lots of structures about how to build, categorize information to turn into, I don't know, object models or diagrams or whatever else helps build that picture. And it is the sort of the idea of a consciously building a mental model. We all do it anyway. We all have different ways of sort of building, retaining information around, sort of particularly around new topics, new subjects. But building something in a way that's got a level of framework or something behind it is super helpful. Um, I think it was a Czech psychologist. I'm going to have to look up the name around who talks about mental scaffolding and building. You sort of have to, if you try and jump to the answer first without having got the scaffolding in place, then that thing is, you don't have all the sort of necessary understanding to make that thing work. I did try that with my kids when you try and teach them some complex stuff, and you realize it's just, why are you jumping ahead? You've got to go through this learning journey to get to that point. So that's sort of like, don't rush it, sort of thing. But also how different people will keep things like different levels of notes or recordings, or the way they structure even the emails or whatever about into some sort of framework or whatever that allows you to quickly refer back to information. And then sort of in a classic physics sense, test it, right? Did you understand that thing? Go and have a conversation with someone. If they can explain it back to you in a way that makes sense, then yeah, perhaps you did understand it, and your model is working, and you can keep building on it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I took some physics classes in high school, and I kind of felt the same, problem solving analytical approach to kind of building up ideas where you have to really take it one step at a time. And I think that was useful for me in terms of developing it. But as someone like you who's like done an entire major in physics, I'd be curious, like how much do you think that's contributed to just your ability to solve problems and analytical thinking? Because I'm currently a computer science major and I'm considering like other pathways I can go down, and that's something that could be very interesting of how physics, although it might not be immediately applicable to a lot of fields, could help someone like really develop a unique approach to be able to see problems in a different way and solve problems. So, how much credit would you give to physics to kind of some of the success you built later on and your ability to solve problems?
Uh, I'm sure there are that I don't there aren't many of my physics group or whatever who would probably shout at me for saying that physics wasn't good. There might be a few. I think I think it's a great question, but I think it's also one of those ones people know how their brains work, and you meet people who remember things by sound, they see things by color, as in like the sort of concepts have colors, for example, synesthesia, or people who see literal pictures in their head of topics they're trying to understand, and the way they think about the given topic is driven through pictures. In my case, it's much more around or has been since I was a teenager more than anything else, the sort of the scientific method and thinking about what's the hypothesis, how is it testable, all the classic was it Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn and so on in terms of the sort of the fundamentals of the scientific method and trying to use those um, data, etc., to make decisions and to learn things and build those sort of frameworks so they're testable. But that's not going to work for everybody else. And I think if you've got if you're like me and that my brain works in that way, it's great. Physics is fantastic because it gives you the structures, it gives you scientific method, it gives you maths and all the other bits and pieces. And I love physics and I love that aspect of understanding the world through those sort of models. Um, but it may be that that sort of structure doesn't fit in the way that you have a mental model of the world, and then you have to find a different mechanism. It always, it's always find it amazing when you discuss how someone came to an idea or a conclusion or a whatever, and they followed a totally different path and they came to the same answer, and you're like, wow, that's I'd never thought of it that way, and that's just it's brilliant. But yeah, no, physics is definitely a good basis if your brain works that way.
Yeah, this is really cool because I think I'm realizing there's so many approaches to, learning something, solving a problem. And I guess as just speaking, I'm realizing for me, I always learn from just doing. So whenever I'm trying to learn something, I just try to get in the weeds as quickly as possible and just to try to acquire like by actually practicing it. And for me, I can't really learn something by reading it. It just goes out one ear. So but yeah, that's really cool. And I think the more I'm thinking about it and all my friends, like they all have different kind of approaches to how they go about studying and the kinds of fields that they excel at because of the way their brain is works. So it's a really
Yeah.
cool thing that's unique about each individual human and how they approach the world. So
It's really interesting. It's interesting. This topic should come up. The I think it was the most recent knowledge project podcast. I can't remember the name of the doctor he's talking to, but talking about if you want to make change happen, you have to act the change. It's no good just thinking about it. It sounds obvious, but then it's interesting how many people then don't do that. You want to lose. If I want to lose weight, which I do, you've got to change the way you eat, right? You've got to change the way you drink. You've got to change the way you exercise. There's no point just thinking about it. Um, as you say, you don't learn by reading. Lots of people learn by writing. That action, the physical action turns on the neurons in the brain that are linked to the concept, and then that embeds faster than it would do if you just try to read it. And there's lots of good evidence to show that reading itself is just it's a bit of a dying art in some ways, I think, unfortunately. But the consumption of knowledge through video or is as an example is not as doesn't embed in the same way that reading does. So that's not to say it's going to be true for everyone, of course, and there are lots of people who find that difficult, reading difficult for very good reasons. So yeah, you've got to find your own route through, but there are trial and learn, and don't be restricted. If it doesn't work in one way, then pick up something else and have a go at it, I think is the answer there somewhere.
yeah, if you had to pick up a new skill like today and a new like knowledge-based skill, like what would your roadmap look like over the next few months? Like what would you do?
Oh, ooh, yes. Um, part of the problem, this is a bit of this sounds like a bit of a shift in gears, but it's certainly true that today with AI and the access to tooling of any sort, you can jump in a sort of shallow way to so many different topics in so many different ways. My youngest son is super interested in biology and in gardening and in pet chickens, in being an apiarist, uh, whatever. Right? He loves all of this sort of stuff, and he's just because he's young and he's just absorbing stuff everywhere. So I find myself having to try and catch up, and the I find the simplest way is just to dive in and ask an AI model, what about this, what about that, and you can very quickly then drop into the rabbit hole. At which point, it's definitely picking up books. Because otherwise, I don't know if you find the same, but reading on screen, I find it's quite distracting. I like to pick up a physical book. I can put down the phone and step away from the computer for a while, and really focus on something. And so the way my brain works, it goes in by reading. So if I had to learn a new skill and it was knowledge-based skill, I'd probably start with a get the deep dive or the shallow, I should say, the shallow layer through some of the classic internet searching and AI tools and the briefings and whatever. But if you really want to start getting into the detail, then it's the literature, and you've got to go and find the lead authors in the field and start reading some of the books. And it depends on what the subject is, but you can very quickly realize that to make progress on brewing beer, for example, you really have to understand biology and chemistry. And if it depends on what level you want to get to, you can very quickly get into a rabbit hole and be like, right, so I need to grow my own hops now. Okay, right, no, that's the whole. Now we're into agriculture, and then we're off to the races. But staying on the path is actually the harder part, I find.
Yeah, I'm sure you've leveraged a lot of AI tools in both your work and personal life over the last few years, and especially in work with your, being the CEO of this rapidly growing company. But I'm curious, like, have there been any creative use cases you found in your life that may not be obvious of how you've used these tools, either for personal or work reasons? I'm just curious. 'Cause I feel like everyone I talk to is like, I sometimes see people using it in very unique ways to solve very unique problems. So I'm wondering if anything jumps out immediately as like something you've been able to leverage it for.
I've uh, this is a classic problem of too many ideas, not enough time. So some simple stuff like when my kids were growing up, we tried to help them with learning whatever anything basically, and they had a couple of old robot toys. There's one which was uh, so robot's probably a bit grand. It's like a thing with a microprocessor. So like there was a little robot called Cosmo who had like a digger thing, and you could drive around and whatever. And another little one which was just a ball, and you could program the ball to drive around like an old turtle. Used to have it when I was a kid at school. And of course, they're so old now that all the apps don't work and the whatever else disappeared. So one of the things that AI was brilliant at was writing code to it knows somehow it's in the training data. There's enough code to enable you to write software for these old
Wow.
tech platforms. So I've got a BBC Microbit, which is like a very dumbed down Arduino or Raspberry Pi or whatever, ideal for learning how to develop software. But if you haven't got the access to the tooling, then direct access by writing code is one thing. And that was because I wanted to build through another friend of mine who's also got an interest in this sort of area, um, sort of soundscape related interactive art, right? So, do you know Strudel? Do you know the
It sounds
programming language
familiar.
Strudel?
Yeah, it does sound familiar.
Okay, it's music as code, right? It's based on I can't remember the name of the product it's based on, but it's if you go to Strudel CC, I think it is online, so you can write code and it plays music. So being able to interact through hardware where you've got I don't know, like some sort of sensor, camera, whatever, watching a room, and then changing the mood of the music based on um, the velocity of people in the room, number of people in the
Oh
room,
wow.
the whatever. Yeah. So those sort of things, you get so far with them, and the AI takes you so far. I've built horse race betting predictors.
Funny.
Uh, Worked with various degrees of success. Uh, anyway, but the thing is, there's so many different opportunities and so many different things that you can go at. Uh, that as you say, it's the jump start to getting somewhere with something, whatever your ideas are, is what I tend to find. What
That's
about you?
awesome.
What's your best example?
Hmm. I definitely use it a lot for like work. I mean, I'm always experimenting, just leveraging like every tool I can find, and I've been using Claude Code the most recently, I think. But I think before I was like more nervous about like long autonomous prompts because just I'm
Mhm.
worried that it would do too much and backtracking would be too difficult if I don't get the outcome I want. But I've been building more confidence with like really taking a long time, the right prompts and like letting it run overnight and coming back and moving a lot quicker with some development, at least for getting first versions of things. And then, learning how to go through the code afterwards and making sure that it's kind of done properly. But I mean, I think that the trade-off in my head is always like speed versus quality. And I think last year I totally ditched quality and just went for speed. And the more and more I vibe coded, the more and more band-aid solutions I kept putting on problems and the more the whole thing broke. So I'm definitely trying to come from a better perspective this year where I try to um like really think about the whole system and think about the solution before I let a model do it, but take a lot of time to think about that and then let the model take as long as it needs to finish it. But I think the quality of these models has been exponentially getting so much better, which is just incredido. I'm curious, like, what do you guys use internally? Do you guys use like Anthropic or OpenAI?
So in work, we are mostly Gemini users. We got Copilot with our M365, the sort of Office stack as well. Um, I think, I mean, you're right though. They're all it's all been said. I think I listened to a podcast called the Marketing AI podcast, the Marketing AI Institute. They do a sort of weekly roundup of what's going on, and they've made the point, I don't know how many times, which I very much agree with, which is you don't have to wait if whichever one you pick. If you wait a little while, that one of the other labs will take a leapfrog, and Google seems to be a bit behind the curve at the moment. They're just not up to in the same pace of iteration as OpenAI and Anthropic, but they're so I'm sort of expecting a big jump at some point. But I think back to your observation, your point, which I think is a really fascinating one, is if you this change curve has been so short that you only have to go back 2 years about, and I think it's Nate Jones has done a good summary of this on one of his YouTube channels, which is he talks about last at the beginning it was about just prompt engineering. No one says prompt engineering anymore. Now it's about writing your markup files, and now it's about agentic control, and now it's about loop,
Hmm.
agentic loops, and the whole thing has evolved. And as you say, you can. In fact, I was even watching the Primeagen over lunch about. I read the code. There was a scandal about someone actually reading the code that the AI was producing, and he made a really good point about some use cases. Don't bother. Just let the vibe code take you, and it solves a short-term problem and makes a little tool that works. And at the other end of the spectrum, you need to know exactly what's being done because you've got a production device or a device that's going to get scrutinized by auditors or regulators, and you need to know exactly what the thing is doing. And so you can take different approaches. And I think that whole progression of learning how to operate with the models and the models getting better at the same time thinking about which bits do you need to interject with as a human is has been a very rapid curve for anyone who's following the space.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that, but I'm also curious because when been in San Francisco, wherever I look, everyone's on Claude Code. It looks like Claude is like the biggest and most popular, definitely in the US and SF for sure. Because it's funny because when I'm in New Jersey or Michigan, it's rare for me to see another friend on Claude Code. Like maybe if they're in computer science class or something, but here if I walk into a coffee shop and look at everyone's screen, everyone's just on Claude Code. So definitely Claude is like at least in San Francisco and the US like leading, but OpenAI like they just released I think yesterday they're 5.6 and it's just they're neck and neck. But I'm curious like in the UK like what are some of the most popular like buzzword models or like what's the most popular currently being used but amongst personal use and also companies. I know Gemini's been very popular even in the US amongst companies. Um
The statistics I looked at most recently, which are probably now completely out of date because it was only 30 seconds ago, but I think the OpenAI market share had fallen from something like whatever it was, 80 or something, down to 60 something and below, and Google had gone from 10% to about 30%, but and now like even in the last couple of months, exactly as you say, you've seen the rise of Anthropic. I think but I think it's a classic. Many years ago, you probably weren't even born. That's a weird thought, but there was a. I went into a coffee shop in San Francisco, and there were 22 people in there, and 21 of them had Macs, and one person had an HP. And I think there's a bit of there's a way of thinking about the world, the San Francisco way of thinking about the world. So it doesn't surprise me that everyone was using Claude Code, the one person using Cursor or whatever. Um, but uh, uh, but I think I think the same is probably true in the UK. I think some of the dynamics around uh, the UK sits between the EU's AI Act, which is a lot more prescriptive in terms of how you regulate AI, and the US model and the UK model, principle based, tends to be quite, obviously data protection is super important, but the AI framework is a little bit different. And I think that does change the dynamic a little bit in how companies are adopting AI within the workplace, and particularly which of the frontier model companies can demonstrate that they can securely protect your data within the sovereignty of your nation and so there's that may not be slightly less of an issue in the US because they're all based in the US, right? So
Mhm.
there are a few different dynamics at play in the market. We also see that there is some obviously there's some investment in things like Mistral and similar. There's a French, I think it's French backed Frontier Lab. So they've there is a different level of competition, but I think it's pretty much probably follows the same pattern within which one's popular, which one's favorite at the moment, and particularly where someone like a Google has got a really good traction with their existing productivity suites, the Google Docs and Google Sheets, etc. There's a really good tie-in. Same with Microsoft, which is a shame that Copilot doesn't quite live up to the same level of capability. Anthropic's found its niche in Claude Code. I say niche, that's pretty big. So yeah, it's probably a similar sort of pattern, but slightly different tensions in the particularly from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, I want to dive into the like regulatory stuff too, because originally there wasn't heavy regulations in the US, but then when some of the more advanced models came out, we saw regulations come around like Fable 5 and GPT 5.6. So, but until then, it was like pretty open, at least in the development of these, and they haven't really put like any rules in place about the development of these technologies, at least researching. But I'm curious like how that's different in Europe, where the regulations are a bit different in the US, and what the kind of approach has been even amongst companies and models in terms of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and how they're kind of approaching the whole thing.
How long do you got? I'd
As long
say
as you got, as long as you want.
I am not an expert. I should have said up front. I play
It's okay.
an AI advocate on TV, etc., etc. I think that the two big differences. I hope I get this right. So the EU AI Act really was about the regulation and particularly the governance within companies about the use of models. Whereas I think what we've seen obviously in the last few months in the US is more about the governance processes around the leading frontier models. So they're two slightly different ends of the spectrum, I would say. Um, in terms of uh, good good AI governance, a lot of the frameworks for companies are sort of there um, already in place, or should be there in place. Right? So you've got data protection, GDPR, as was in the EU's GDPR Act and DPA 2018 in the UK. So to the way you treat data and manage data, there are passporting rules for data sovereignty between EU states and I don't think that applies to the US states. It's slightly different. You've got all this, things like cybersecurity frameworks, ISO 27001 in the UK and Europe. So you've got a lot of frameworks that are peripheral to AI, and the bits that things like the AI Act or the UK's principles around AI are really about the guardrails around with which you deploy models. So it's how did you approve a model? How do you know that the data is being trained? Doesn't has no bias in it or is ethically sourced. that the outcomes are fair, and all the other good stuff, which is then very specific to the model, or specific to the outcome of the process. So it's a build on things that most companies will have had in place. I think part of the challenge that is very different, though, is that in the past, and this sort of came around within going a long time back, there was a sort of the goal to democratize software development. I'm talking about 20 years ago, probably, where lots of companies developed tools that you could just do the sort of drag and drop idea of anyone could use it, anyone could just do their own software development. And of course, what that ended up happening was that lots of people who tried it would build stuff which half worked, didn't have any support. When it broke, no one knew who to call. It was just Dave or Sheila who built it, who left the company or were sick or whatever. So suddenly businesses found that they had this array of end user computing models and so on. And I think the same is sort of true with the pattern of AI, which is you can build your own local solution, which then becomes a really important part of your workflow or the way you think or the tools the things you deploy or give out to the world or whatever. But as soon as that tries to scale in any way, that's hard. It still requires good software discipline or production management discipline or whatever. You still got to have, if you're building stuff into core processes, it needs to meet disaster recovery rules or business continuity rules or all the other wrappers that go around it. And whilst there's a huge gain to be had from people using tools for personal productivity gains, as soon as you try and build those into more complex software products or into processes, then you've got to do the same sort of discipline that you need to have around your standard production suite. So that sort of empowerment of the individual, whether it's drag and drop, no code, low code type tooling or AI tooling or whatever, at some point the rubber has to hit the proverbial road, and you need to have the right governance in place. So I think there's a lot of little test and learn pilots, which then quickly get wound back into something bigger because it's realized you can't sustain it, or it needs another thing to make it really, really productive.
Makes sense. Yeah, most companies have by now like jumped on the AI wagon and have mostly implemented especially big companies as well have implemented AI, which although big companies are tend to be more slower moving, I think AI has been such a big and transformative productivity gain that pretty much every big company that wants to survive has integrated AI. And I think that raises a lot of questions about like where the world is going, where the world is shifting, because every year it's impossible to predict what will be the next year and what these big companies will look like, what these smaller companies will look like, and what the individual experience of like work, career, and life will look like. And underneath that umbrella, there's a lot of people that are extremely scared and worried about a future where extreme automation and agentic workflows eliminate the mass need of workers. And, as someone who's worked a startup, scaled a startup over the last 18 months, I'm curious, like your internal read of like the progression of this automation and like how the need for human has evolved or maybe shifted, and, what your internal feeling is about where we're heading.
You're not holding back on this serious questions of the day. So I think any company with an eye on the future will be either preparing the way to or be training its people in the skills needed for the future. And as I said, the AI tools right now, and of course this could change tomorrow, right? Google or Anthropic or whoever could release a new set of tools would totally change the world. But at the moment, if you want to integrate an AI solution into something that's going to be customer facing, that's going to be part of an important service or whatever, there's a huge amount of the standard engineering that needs to go around it. So you're still going to need people who are change experts, project management experts, business analysts, people who understand how to think about edge cases, use cases, to think about what happens if this goes wrong, that goes wrong, and so on and so forth. So you need all that. Then you need people who are creative, who can think, use tools to solve existing business problems. If you manage to take out of your day a number of routine tasks or manual processes or things that took you 4 hours, which now take 10 minutes or whatever. That's great. You're now freed up to do your job in a whole different way. And then you will find a different bottleneck in the company. Um, I'm a big believer in systems thinking as ways of, there are many different flavors, but systems thinking is a way of thinking about how business functions around purpose and about the flow of work. And you're only as fast as the slowest part. You're bottlenecked by the most constrained part of the chain. And so you might find that you increase productivity in this part of a business, but then you need more capacity, you need more newer tools, you need different things in a different part of the world. So um, the goal will be to increase the access to training or the access to uh, experience to help people move to the parts of the business that you need them to now focus on. It might be that as I say, you take out some of the more repetitive tasks and you automate it or you put in AI tools or whatever, but that's gonna open up a blocker somewhere else, and that's where I think the person of the future. No, yes, there'll still be people, so that's good. The skill set for the future will change from being more deep skill, lots of experience in a particular area to that plus a broader view of how you adopt and adapt those skills to different problems. And
Mm.
that's the classic T-shaped individual. Um, but being able to sort of understand that and where the problems might sit and how you go about solving them is going to be super, super important to any company. Um, how does that impact the rest of society? Well, hopefully that then means that the way that the work is done in companies change. And we saw that back in the end of the 1990s and the e-commerce revolution, the rise of websites, the digital agenda, digital transformation, et cetera, et cetera. The way that companies went from designing advertising campaigns that would run once a year to doing, in-minute SEO optimization for particular keywords. They went from taking 6 months to release a product and now doing it in 6 weeks, and that's great. But that means your competitors are doing the same. So the rising tide is you're not going to have much of an advantage for long until the next person comes along. Again, you need those creative people to start to find the advantage and to keep the wheels moving so that you can remain competitive in a
Mhm.
rapidly changing market.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't, it's hard for me to see a future where there's like so much excess or from AI output that there's like universal basic income, as I've heard as an argument. But I mean, from what I've noticed, at least, I think that in the current state, like AI will create anything you ask it to create. That doesn't mean it's good. Like it can pattern match and create almost anything. And people who can make something and take a risk and make the right hedge bet on like what's actually important in the world, that's always going to be a skill that requires more than just the production. But as you said, like the bottleneck of speed of to MVP or speed to a first version is kind of been solved for most people, which just means what's the next bottleneck? And maybe the next bottleneck is like making the actual decision of what needs to be done, which is a much bigger question that, even as I'm working on something, I feel like I'm guessing half the time and it could be just a completely wrong bet. But um, I'm sure the risk takers who take a risk in terms of making something that's very technically difficult now that they've kind of can move faster, or the risk of hedging on a human behavior bet of like, betting on a human behavior that's not expected. I'm sure those people will still stand out and exceed in the market when, one bottleneck's been solved, but I'm sure, as you said, there's probably so many more to kind of go down the rabbit hole and competition will always be there and there's always going to be the best product, even if anyone can make a product. So,
100%. And this is the bit that I completely agree with you. I think it's very true. But also, I haven't done this. I must go and do this as a project for the weekend, perhaps. Which is, if you think about all workers in any market, so the UK or the US, or it doesn't matter, and then you take out everyone who does a manual job, purely manual. You take out everyone who does a job which is not take them out, but you say exclude them from the AI bubble for a second, the AI Venn diagram, whatever. Say, okay, you can't plumb a bathroom using a prompt, right? At least not today. You can't fix a road, you can't lop a tree, you can't teach a classroom of kids, you can't tend someone in hospital, you can't, et cetera, et cetera. So you go from the whole. workforce down to another chunk of the workforce, and then you take that chunk of the workforce and you go, right, there's always going to be the entrepreneurs and the leaders, and that's 10% of this chunk, and that 10% will go and find new ways and solutions, and they'll do the new business start, whatever happens, whatever tools. It was the same as true back in the e-commerce days. It's the same as probably true. Then you've got a whole bunch of people who will be needed to do the marketing, do the finance, do the whatever the tools are. So there's a huge percentage of the population who are going to find either the roles don't change at all or are enhanced in some small way. And then there's another big slug of the population who will be working with new tools to do something slightly different, at least for the foreseeable future, given the way that things are developing. And then hopefully the really big hope is that then frees up people who have the different ways of thinking about the world, or who perhaps wouldn't have succeeded in a much more in a sort of in inverted commas traditional company structure, to really use the tools to be able to tap into their brains in whatever way, and come up with different ideas, different solutions, different ways of solving problems, because it's not like we don't have a lot of them. There's plenty of problems to be worked through. So unlocking that potential in society is also super important.
That's a good read, and that's a very positive like view. I agree with. That there's always gonna be the core people you need, regardless. You can't AI prompt a plumbing job, and the number of people who have ideas, which is probably a lot of people, have much easier time in terms of getting something out there, which could honestly mean the number of companies will probably skyrocket in a good way, where there might be less number of people at Google or less number of people at Apple, but there's going to be maybe 10x the number of companies in every small little niche, which is a feature I'm really excited about because that could be really cool. Um, but I think that, sorry.
No, I was just sorry. I was just again, it was a statistics point, but I have roughly. I think the same is true in the US, right? So something like 95% of all the companies in the UK are small end of SME, one or two people up to about 5 or 10, and then the other 5 or 10%, I can't quite remember, are the large corporates. And then something like 50% of all the people in the UK are employed by large corporates, and 50% are
Mm,
in terms of number of companies versus number of people employed. So they're already a huge number of entrepreneurs, people who just get on and do. They open a hairdressing salon, they run their plumbing business, they run a nursery, whatever, and they do it um, uh, with some new tools, and then maybe those new tools will make them slightly more efficient or better able to serve their customers or whatever. But the bottleneck becomes how much they can scale their time, right? There's only so many hours in a day, and maybe they can win a bit more work and do a bit better in terms of managing some of the back office tasks that they don't perhaps want to deal with. But their time doesn't scale beyond them as an individual until they grow the company. So
mhm.
if you look at the way the market is structured, there's plenty of people who can, exactly as you say, step into those single smaller companies and still find the growth niche.
Yeah, it's cool. I
If
don't know
if
that. I don't know there's so many companies that were just owned by a few people, but I hope it continues to stay that way and grow because I feel like I mean, at least personally, this might be true for everybody, but having ownership of something feels a lot more fulfilling, at least. Leading something, but I'm not sure if everyone's that way, but it could be cool if everyone can have their own little thing, or at least somewhat that people who've dreamed of having something could, have a little bit easier path to getting there, maybe, even if it's at a smaller scale. Um, but
it comes back down to I think the important bit, and I've been this is not an advert. I'm not affiliated with this company or whatever, but there's an app called Imprint, which is a sort of philosophy training app, and it's brilliant. It's a bit like your Duolingos and your Brilliants and your whatever, and they sort of bite-sized training, and I'm sort of really following that course at the moment, and it's talking about Kierkegaard and his so existentialism. Sorry, this is going to sound like a long-winded way of getting to an answer, so apologies. But existentialism and what it means to take ownership, be accountable for your decisions, and the anxiety and in Kierkegaard's words, the anxiety of having so much choice and having so many options, and being able to take decisions, own the options, and move on in life and be truly free and fully empowered and all that other good stuff. I am probably butchering the entire philosophical canon
It's
of
okay.
Kierkegaard, but the idea really struck me. And of course, there's there are people who that anxiety or that worry about taking on all that responsibility is hard, right? There's a lot to worry about, there's a lot to manage, and
Mm.
you may not be at the right life stage or whatever. But for people who have an idea and exactly as you say, want to get it to that first point, now has got to be the almost the best time ever to be able to go and do that with the tools available, with the sort of the capabilities you can lean on from anywhere in the world if you so choose to get you going. That's for a group of people who are going to do that, and then create the basis for the people who perhaps aren't in that position, who want to work or want to own some, be part of something, but haven't been able to do that first step themselves. So there's plenty of opportunity to go at.
No, I think your philosophical
More
point is
people
true.
like you.
Yeah. I think your philosophical point is really true, and it made me really think because I think there are a lot of people who just thrive on the stability because there's the pressure, the anxiety of having too much to manage could actually make one go insane. And there's a lot of people who thrive on like the structure, like a normal job, the times, the windows, the limited window of the things you need to achieve. And for a lot of people, that's great, and it helps them live like a very stable life. So, well, I don't think everyone's going to become an entrepreneur the more I think about it. But yeah, that is true. Hopefully, the people who do want to take that next step can take that next step. And there's definitely got to be enough jobs, as you described earlier, to allow people who thrive on the stability to continue functioning and live happy, great lives. So,
100%.
um,
100%.
so yeah, I'm curious. You joined this company when it was at 160 people 18 months ago, and we haven't really talked about this, but I'm curious because in the last 18 months, what are you most proud of? Because I'm sure you spent this has been your whole life grinding and trying to scale this and grow this. So, how would you summarize like 1 to 3 things you're most proud of at your time at this company?
um, oh, blimey. I think there's the sort of the outcome answers, right? There's the outcomes of you managed to get this strategy agreed and landed, or this board meeting went really well, or this this software deployment went really well, whatever. There's some really really good things there, but um, it all always comes back to people, and it all changes people, all society's people. It's all about people. Everything's people. Soil and Green is people, for those who are old enough. The the bit that where for example, my first we have a 1 day a year. We're a hybrid company, so we tend to work geographically spread. So we get everyone together once a year and we do our sort of communications day, staff comms day, and we had everyone in the room running a sort of workshop session, and everyone's in tables, and there's a real buzz in the room, a real energy, and a you can sort of you can just feel it. You can feel people being involved and engaged and happy to be there uh, and to contribute and to learn from others and all that sort of good stuff. So standing to one side and just sort of watching that is fantastic. That's always gives me, always has done in any of the jobs I've had, where you can take the sort of reflected pride or take some of the joy of having brought together a group of people uh, to have given them the time and the space and the opportunities to think about things and to build the networks and the connections and all that sort of stuff. That's a fantastic feeling and a really good. It's great. You can say it's really energizing because you've got all however many 100 and whatever people in a room, and you can you get I get energized by having that happen. And then the other one, again, we serve a lot of patients, and every now and again you get a fantastic piece of feedback about someone in the team who's gone the extra mile to really make a difference to someone, and it's changed their life in sometimes very, very serious ways, and sometimes you know, make their life easier or whatever, maybe not quite so serious, but still change their life in a positive way. And that's a fabulous email to get. Email to get. Um, not always, not every email which lands on my desk is a happy, positive one. But those are wonderful because you know that we tend to, as companies and organizations, you tend to get very inward focused. Everything is about what you're doing, and you've got to remind yourself that it's the reason is out there. Whatever you're, whether you're a healthcare, so our patients, or whether you're tree surgeons, and it's the trees. Yeah, that's you got to remember the thing is out there. And if you spend all your time worrying about what you're doing, you're forgetting the thing that's out there. And so being reminded of that and being conscious and thinking about that and looking for advice and feedback and listening to stories and all that sort of good stuff. Again, it makes you realize that you're having a real positive impact on the world, and that's a great feeling to have.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Keith. Well, I just want to thank you for your time today and for sharing your incredible stories and for all the incredible work you've done to help so many people. So, your story is truly fascinating, and I loved to learn about it. So, keep doing great things. And what's next for you after this?
In about, I'm going to get through my emails. I've done my end of week email to the company, so I feel good about that. I've got a few more tasks to clear up, then a little bit of exercise, and then somewhere my youngest child will need picking up from a friend's house. So that'll be a fun drive across London on a hot afternoon, and then we'll see. Well, maybe we'll watch England play Norway
Oh yeah.
tomorrow. That's the big thing we're
Good
building up
luck.
for. Thank
Norway's
you
been
very much,
crazy.
and it's a roller coaster already. It's a roller
Yeah.
coaster. And thank
Awesome.
you for the time. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. You're an inspiration from the entrepreneurial sense. I'm really looking forward to seeing where you go with your various projects and ideas. So thank you for the time
Yeah,
we've
we'll
had
stay
today.
in touch. Hopefully make something cool enough to show you. So
Oh,
um
I'm sure. I'm sure. Um,
awesome. Thanks,
Take
Keith. Take
care.
care. This will be out on
Bye.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Awesome. Bye.